several factors which is interrelated with the term vernacular architecture, which are local resources, local knowledge, local community, and craftsmen, and the needs, values, or the culture, the ways of living of the communities. But how those terms are related between each other, well, it can differ from place to place, culture to culture, even region to region. But in general, I think we can say that there is such kind of relationship between those factors, such as the local community expresses their needs and values to the local craftsmen, which is actually nothing very new for them, as they are already living together. And the craftsman transfers their local knowledge to the local community. For the construction of the vernacular houses, most of the time local community obtains local materials from the resources surrounding their living places, and they utilize those materials as the construction material or for the maintenance activities for their houses. And in the end, with the help of as a result of the collaboration between local community and the craftsmen, so the vernacular houses are constructed. And in the end, it is, as much as I realize in several researchers as well as in my case study area, it is a sort of common way to show the local people's appreciation to local craftsmen by giving them small gifts. So this is actually the traditional way of constructing vernacular houses, which we can say it's, in a way, it's sustainable, because there is this kind of circle where the local people make the maintenance of the local resources, if it is in control, by collecting the materials for their daily activities as well as for the construction works. And in the end, they make contributions for their daily lives. So, but how this cycle is nowadays, let's talk about it in the following slides. But before that, as I said before, this cycle might be different in different regions. So in the end, of course, the outcome of the vernacular architecture or the vernacular housing would also differ from region to region, as you can see. These are like different examples from different places around the world. The way the local people expresses themselves, they utilize the local materials. Sometimes, for example, in this case, in order to deal with the extreme weather conditions, they prefer to use stone materials instead of wood, for example. And this is an example from Japan. So as we can see from different cases, so vernacular architecture is actually physical representation of the local identity and the local values, as well as the social structure of the communities. So it is crucial for us to sustain the vernacular architecture even today. And what about the case in Turkey? How the vernacular architecture is in Turkey? So you can see an example of Safranbolu town. These are some examples, but of course, as I mentioned before, so the vernacular houses may change, the typologies, the materials, the formation of the houses might change depending on the region. So on this slide, you can see the map of Turkey. So the gray bold lines represents the different geological regions of the country. So we have 7 different regions which has slightly different or quite different climatic conditions. And these are also reflected on the type of the houses. But when you look, these are just examples, of course, there are more varieties. But when we look at the examples, so excluding the vernacular houses which are constructed by the stones only, so when we look at the houses constructed with the with the wooden method, by using the wooden materials. So the case of Trabzon is actually quite unique in terms of the structural features and the facade. You can, maybe it's hard to see in this photo, but I'll be showing you in the following slides. And the interesting part is that this unique architectural tradition can only be seen in this orange part of the northeastern part of the Turkey. So it's very unique even in Turkey, but it's not the value of the houses are not unique, is not limited to our country only. Even, for example, in some of the most important reference books, including the introducing the vernacular architecture, are also introducing the vernacular houses in Trabzon. So in this study, I am focusing on the vernacular houses in Trabzon. That's why I'll be introducing the city and the houses in this region more in the following slides. So as I mentioned before, the city is located in the northeastern part of Turkey. So the city has 17 districts, and the place that I'm focusing on is in Sürmene district, which is marked in this gray area. And in the Sürmene district, there are various villages, of course, but the area that I'm focused on is this part where Manahoz River is located, and my case study areas, 3 villages named Karacakaya, Üstündal, and Dirlik villages are located here. You can see small photos of the case study areas. When you look at the photos, I think you can more or less get an idea that it's a it's a hilly area, it's a mountainous area. The topography is quite harsh, and generally the houses are located, excluding the case of Karacakaya, most of the houses in other villages are scattered around the site. Other than the reasons that I explained in the previous slide, there are a few more reasons for me to focus on this area. So these 3 villages are actually located on the traditional trade route, which was passing from here. Therefore, since the long time back, there have been like various civilizations living in here, and which was reflected also the architectural style of the region. And right now, as it has been experienced in different parts of the world, these villages are also under the transition period. There are several changes as a result of the globalization process. And as a result of that, the population living in this area is decreasing. Another interesting, this is actually a global fact, I think. But what is interesting in this area is that the population in here is actually seasonal. Like in summertime, the population increases drastically comparing to that of in autumn or winter times. And the conservation activities are recently initiated in here. So I think it is a crucial time to deal or focus on the situation right now to provide more feedbacks for the ongoing conservation activities. So you can see the map of the villages with the houses that I examined. So in total, I measured 75 vernacular houses, and with all the owners, I also made the questionnaire survey. So here, thinking that, yes, I hope the video is playing. Just to make you get you familiarized with the region, I would like to show you a very short video. You can see the topography. The houses are generally located far from each other and surrounded by the agricultural fields. So you can see the agricultural field of hazelnuts. It's very mountainous area, and this is generally the layout, like village layouts in the region. Yes. Oh, sorry. So in terms of the physical features of the houses, so since the land is very the topography is quite harsh, so the houses are whether 2 or 3 story high, and from one side it looks like 2 story high, but from the other side, because of the topography, it just looks like the one floor. And the lowest floor is constructed by stone because the region receives a lot of rain throughout the whole year, and the humidity inside the soil is quite high. Therefore, the lowest layer is always constructed by stones, but the upper layers there are actually various construction methods for that. So I will be introducing the details, but this one, as you can see, it has a triangular pattern, which in the local language we say muskalı dolma. On the other hand, for example, as you can see on this example, the fillings of the facade can also be in the form of square. So this is another example. In terms of the plan formation, although there are various plan formations, I can say this is the most typical one. So the lowest floor, which I introduced a while ago, was used to be the animal shelter. So they used to have their animals here, and they had the stairs between, so that they, without going out during the cold weather, so they could just feed their animals from the higher level. And the upper level is the living place for the family. Generally, the house has 2 entrances, and the place which is shown as 3 is generally has the stone or soil, so that without taking off their shoes, so they can easily go in the house and go to the agricultural site. On the one side of the corridor is always ashane, which is living and sorry, I think I have the photos. Yes, so this is, maybe it's hard to see, but the lowest layer is the animal shelter, and the number 2, which is called ashane, is the kitchen and living area, actually like socializing place, eating place, kitchen. So it's like a multifunctional area that people used to use. And this is the 2-sided entrances that I mentioned before. And the other half of the house is the place where the family lives. So we can say, for example, maybe this area is like more private. The guests and other people cannot enter. So the area which is called 4 is called hayat, which is a transition place between different rooms. So the number 5 is generally the sleeping rooms of the different families, as before extended families used to live in these houses. In terms of the structural features, as I said before, actually in the Trabzon city there are various construction styles, whether it can be timber frame filled with stones, like block, as it can be seen here, it can be block stones or crushed stones, or the fillings can be in the triangular pattern, or it can be the mixture of triangular and the square pattern, or it's also possible to see the wooden masonries or the stone masonry walls in the region. But the area which I'm focusing here is actually among these 6 types, the 5 of them can be seen in this area. So these are the general features of the houses, vernacular houses in the region. So I would like to continue with the current condition of the villages as well as the vernacular houses. Here you can see a photo of a village. So for this research, actually, other than the case study areas that I selected, I visited several villages. So this is one of those called Ballıca village. I think you can see the new houses, new concrete houses, which are 3-4 story high. In some villages it can be even higher, and I think it's quite difficult to recognize the vernacular houses. Maybe one here, one storage building here, but the rest is almost the new houses. You can also see the tea gardens, agricultural fields, and the forest area starting just after the village. So to explain it in the plan formation, I can say, so these are some of the villages that some of the houses that I visited actually in Üstündal village. So the red represents the vernacular houses, and normally they were surrounded by the agricultural fields, as I said before. But because of the new road constructions, so it's quite common in the region to see this kind of divided fields, and it's not only because of the modern infrastructure introduced to the village, but also after passing away, for example, the father of the mother of the family, there have been several conflicts between the siblings, and as a result, the land is also divided into sometimes 2, 3, 4, depending on the number of the siblings. And it's not only the agricultural field, of course. Sometimes the houses can also be divided because of this inheritor conflicts. So going back to the process of constructing the vernacular houses, so this is the process or the diagram that I introduced in the beginning of my presentation. So when we look at the current situation, how the process is right now, well, as I said before, as a result of the globalization, there have been various changes even in the rural areas, and the expectation of the people are now is quite different than the previous time, as this is like a global issue, nothing to do with the case of Trabzon actually. As I said before, there have been various lifestyle changes. So this resulted in the loss of the community ties and the cooperation between the local craftsmen and the community for the construction. And another problem in the case of Turkey is the changes in the forestry law. So before, it was possible for local people to obtain the local materials from the surrounding forest areas because the forest was, at that time, it was a public property. However, after 1960s, the ownership of the forests have been passed to the government. So it's now the government property, and the maintenance should be done by the government, which means that the local people cannot get the materials from the forest. Therefore, this tie is also being lost. So in the end, this cycle is not available anymore. So we can say that the lifestyle changes of the local people are actually reflected to their living spaces as well. So right now, when we look at the villages, so yes, we see the vernacular houses, which were constructed in relationship with the climate and culture and the surrounding environment, and it is important for the local identity. But now when we look at the villages, it's not only vernacular houses, but there are several modern houses, as I introduced before, and modern in a sense, new concrete houses, I mean. And interestingly, there is this group which is in between. I title them as semi-vernacular houses because they are constructed recently, but they utilize the construction method of the vernacular houses in the traditional construction method without having any cooperation between the local people. But it is, I think, how to say, it is more sensitive for the identity of the villages as well as the natural surrounding. But the problem here is that it's very expensive because the local people cannot obtain the material from the nature, so they have to buy. Also, they need to pay the money for the work, for the workers. That's why it's very expensive and it's not very easy to construct this kind of houses for the villagers. In the end, what we see in some extreme cases, as you can see in here, like 5-6 story apartments, this is also a village, and it's just, I think if we don't control it, in some time maybe these villages will also be transformed into, which is already, the process has been started, I think, but it is under the process of urbanization. As you can see again, like new houses in the rural environment. And in some cases, the vernacular houses are abandoned and they're decaying. So I think it's a very crucial time to take action to conserve our heritage in the rural areas as well. So as a result, the idea of conservation in the rural areas, maybe I forgot to mention, right now, the conservation activities most of the time focuses on the heritage sites or the buildings in the urban areas in Turkey. But the rural conservation activities are quite in the early stage. That's why I think it's also important to make the architectural conservation in the rural areas. Well, in terms of the architectural conservation, what I would like to mention here is that the community participation and the collaboration between different stakeholders is very important for the sustainability and the success of the architectural conservation activities. So I don't want to read each statement one by one, but what I would like to mention here is that since 1970s, the importance of the community participation to the process and the continuous maintenance and the usage of the buildings are expressed in various international charters, and in every conservation process, the stakeholders are encouraged to make the involvement of the communities as well as the different stakeholders. So when we look at the case in Turkey, when the architectural conservation activities started in the beginning, I will again just give brief information here. When we look at the timeline, actually the regulation for the architectural conservation activities was initiated quite early. But when we look at the first regulations focusing on the architectural conservation, we realize that actually those regulations are focusing on the monuments or historical artifacts, not the heritage sites like the common people are using, for example, like the vernacular houses. And the next phase is actually focusing on the urban areas, and only after the law number 728, which is accepted in 2007, which I assume quite new. So this is actually the only regulation focusing on the natural areas as well as the rural areas. However, there are several debates and critics by different researchers saying that although right now there are more sensitive approach, but still the lack of the definition and the regulation for the rural conservation activities are not well developed, or for example, like after 3 years of the ICOMOS Venice Charter, Turkey accepted the charter in the national level as well. But when we look at the implications, it takes actually a longer time. So there are still points to be improved in this regard. But of course, not all the cases are bad examples. We also have good examples. So these are some good examples from Turkey. One of them is Safranbolu. Another one is Cumalı Kızık village. And the next one is Beypazarı. Actually, I researched about these 3 cases in detail, but thinking about the time limitation of the day, as well as since I'm the last presenter of the day, I don't want to make you bored too much. So I'll be just giving brief information about these 3 cases. So Safranbolu is the oldest conservation site in Turkey. Almost in 1970s, the first conservation activities were initiated, and it was accepted as the World Heritage Site in 1994. In terms of the Cumalı Kızık village, it is one of the closest example of an Ottoman village. And the conservation activities were started almost like a decade after the Safranbolu. And yes, it is also accepted as the World Heritage Site, which is quite recent though. But in case of Beypazarı, it is still under the process. They are still making the preparation to be listed as the World Heritage Site. Different than the other 2 cases, here the motivation of the mayor was very crucial for the beginning of the conservation activities. So these 3 cases are considered to be 3 of the best examples of the conservation activities in Turkey. But in here, I would like to give more information about the case of Cumalı Kızık because it's village, and so it can give more information for my case study area as well. So it is located in the city of Bursa, which is in the western side of the country. And so we see actually several stakeholders were included in the process. The first attempt for the conservation was done by the government in 1980s. Following that, there was an architectural competition organized by the Chamber of Architects in Bursa and Ahan Foundation. And local people donated their local traditional tools to the museum, and then they opened actually an ethnography museum in 1990s. With the collaboration of a university in Turkey, the government and the university created a conservation plan in 1993. There were several projects and activities in order to increase the conservation activities in the village. There were some PR activities done by the private sector, and as I said before, the point here is that different organizations were collaborating, and it's quite complex scenario for the conservation of a small village actually. Yes. When we come to my case study area, which is in Sürmene, we realize that actually by the initiation or the request of a local NPO, the local government and the staff from NPO did make a technical visit to the village in 2017, which is quite recent. And after that, the local government were also agreed that, okay, this is an important place and which is under a big transition, so we need to conserve it. So after this technical visit, they started to take an action to conserve the vernacular houses in the villages. So it's quite new. Maybe that's why right now there is no participation of any university, any local people, or any private sector right now, but it is under process. So even in 2019, so the conservation plan of the conservation plans are actually they are under the process right now, but even the designation of the, for example, Dilik village was under consideration in 2019, which was my last visit to the sites. So maybe in the future, or hopefully in the future, there will be more participation from the local people as well. But in this presentation, I'll be sharing their opinions about the conservation of their own houses and village in the following slides. So as a result, Karacakaya was registered as an urban site, and Üstündal village was registered as, which I can translate as immovable cultural property required to be conserved. I hope it makes sense. So when we look at the differences, so we realize that actually in the case of Karacakaya, the conservation regulations were stricter than that of in Üstündal, because the houses in this village, in Karacakaya village, are actually relatively closely located to each other, and they form, you can easily perceive the border of the village. But when it comes to the Üstündal, because of the topography and the location of the houses, of course, and of course the number of the houses as well, so they are very scattered, and it's very hard to recognize the blocks of the vernacular houses from, I mean, in the eye level, I can say. So maybe that's why the local government and the regional conservation board, they decided to have two different approaches for the conservation of the vernacular houses in these two villages, which are actually closely related to each other. So the architectural conservation activities have been initiated in this area, yes, but there are some problems, because the responsibility area of the local conservation board is actually very large. They have a big region which includes several cities, and of course so many villages and so many houses, but their office, they only have one office with limited staff and of course budget, and these areas are all mountainous areas, and it's difficult to go, especially in the harsh winter conditions. Even in the normal time, they need to have a proper car to go there. So even if they make the designation of the houses or the villages, the controlling process is quite challenging, yes, actually. Therefore, it is not a solution, or it's not the end of the process to designate the houses. So the maintenance and the continuous controlling process is also necessary, I think. So in order to understand and record the existing situation of the houses, I did several field research, and during those field research, I did the architectural measurement survey of the vernacular houses from the exterior as well as the interior of the houses, as much as the owners allowed me to get in their houses. And I did the questionnaire survey with the owners of the houses. So, as I mentioned before, in this presentation, or mainly I can say, I'll be focusing on the results of the questionnaire survey, and which are related to architectural conservation. So from here, I would be talking about the potentials of the architectural conservation from the perspective of the owners. For this purpose, I directed various questions to them, and I asked them what do they think about the importance of their houses. And most of them expressed that they are very important and they want to conserve it as a house. I was asking them whether they would like to change the function of the house to a shop or to a guest house, etc. But all of them not all of them, but most of them mentioned that they want to keep the house as it is. These are similar questions confirming the previous answers of the houses, of the owners. And the main motivation for them to conserve their houses, so I asked them actually three main factors, to list three main factors for their desire to conserve their houses. And depending on the number of each factor, I give 3 points, 2 points, or 1 point for each criteria that they mention. And the two highest factors were the houses were inherited from their ancestors, and they have a lot of memories, or since it's the place that he or she was born, so they want to continue living in this place, or at least keeping it where they can come seasonally. This number 3 is, I don't think it's a motivation for them, but maybe more like a limitation. But since it was their answer, so I didn't exclude it from this table, because they mentioned that there was no other village in the village, or since it's a shared property, although I want to change this house or destroy this house, the other owners, they don't want to do so I need to keep it. There is no other option. So I think it's more like a limitation. And there are some other factors, as you can see, for the motivation of their houses. Although they said that they don't want to demolish their houses and they want to keep it because of most of the time more emotional reasons. But when we see the reality in the village, actually we can see this kind of new houses very often. Or they keep the vernacular house, but around the vernacular house they build new modern buildings. So the reason here is that most of the case, the reason behind this situation is that they have some conflicts between the siblings, and they don't want to live in the same house. So as a result, they construct a new house. Of course, the facilities of the vernacular house cannot respond the expectation of the contemporary life, but in most of the case the vernacular houses are already changed, so they already have the proper bathroom, kitchen facilities, etc., all the furnitures and all inside. So most of the case it's because of the conflicts between the inheritors. But as I mentioned before, there are also, it's very few I can say, but they also have or I also saw this kind of new houses constructed in a traditional way. This is the interior side of it, so I don't know if you can recognize, but even here the joint techniques were also the vernacular style that it was used in the vernacular houses. Well, these are maybe the only potentials for now, but there are several challenges from the perspective of the local people as well as from the perspective of the local government. So from here, I'll be talking about the challenges for the architectural conservation in these three villages. As I mentioned before, most of the residents were actually seasonal residents, so almost 90% of the respondents were seasonal respondents. And they prefer to come to the village in the summertime, and maybe early autumn they return to their place where they spend most of the time of the year. And main reason for them to return is actually harvesting, to do agricultural activities. And the main agricultural products in the region is, as I already talked about it a bit in some of the photos, the hazelnut and tree production are the main harvesting products in the region. You can see the people making the drying process for the hazelnut. Well, as I mentioned a while ago, they have made several changes to their houses, and they actually have the motivation to make more chances in the future. So we can see various changes in the exterior as well as in the interior parts. The changes in the roofing material is one of the biggest changes observed in the villages because of the heavy rainfalls. Originally, the roofs were constructed by roof tiles, but it's very hard to make the maintenance. And as I mentioned, they are not permanent residents; they are just seasonal residents. So it's very hard for them to do. And they come to the village for the agricultural purposes, so they don't want to spend the time for agriculture other than, for example, they don't want to spend their time for roof maintenance, but they want to spend their time for making the harvesting. That's why the metal sheets are very common in the villages. But the case is that the materials can be very different. It can be different color, different texture, so it creates a bit unharmonious look. There are changes in the window style. New materials were used on the facades. They created new openings, or sometimes they cancel the existing openings. And this one is a bit extreme example, because they made a almost in the same size of the existing house. They made a new addition. Again, this is because of the inheritor conflict. So I could actually enter this house, and it was divided into two, and both owners made additions in both sides. And this is like an interior partition. The material in the corridor was also changed. So these are, since they are living in even if it's temporarily, they are living inside the houses, and it's the vernacular houses cannot respond their expectations of today's contemporary life. That's why I think the changes are inevitable. But what we can do is to provide some guidelines, some methods for the local people, so that at least for example, the materials that they use on the facade may have the same language, the same pattern, or at least similar. So I think it is important, as I mentioned before. So there are like various materials used for the roof maintenance as well as for the facade, and it creates unharmonious environments. When we look at to the plan level, so this was the original plan layout of an example of a vernacular house. So I created it with the reference data that I obtained from the owner, as well as my observations on the site. So what we can see is that, first of all, the animal shelter was transformed into a wood storage area. And there is a new addition in front of the facade, as you can see here. And before, an extended family was living in here, but right now only 3 people, just 3 people are living in the house. Therefore, the house itself is very big for them, and there are very unused rooms which were whether transformed into, for example, a kitchen or a bathroom, which is originally located outside the building, since it's not convenient. So there were some functional changes in the house, as well as the material changes because of the aging of the material, or not inconvenient in the contemporary life. So this is the facade. So as I mentioned before, you can see the addition for the toilet, and there are some change of the materials because they cannot find the original material. That's why instead of using the stone materials, they use the cement, which is easy for them to access and do it by themselves to fill the infillings, fallen materials. And so this is an example of the kitchen area. Normally it was a big hall for the entrance, but now they transformed it into a kitchen space. And this area was actually ashane, which was used as kitchen and living area. It was the most vital and lively place of the vernacular house in the old times. But right now, since they mostly prefer living in the small side in front of the house, which is the sting room and kitchen, where kitchen and sting room located. Therefore, they use this big open area for the storage of their harvesting products, which is the hazelnut in this case. So this is another example. Again, this is the original plan of the vernacular house. And you can see this is the house that I mentioned a while ago, which was divided into two because of the inheritor conflicts. So the new edition, I couldn't enter the new edition, this part. Therefore, I cannot introduce how the plan is formed in this part, but I can only show the vernacular house of this part, I mean the below part, and the addition which the owner made for the bathroom and kitchen at the lower part of the vernacular house. So it's quite, there are not so many examples like this, but although it's few, there can be such examples exist as well. And when I ask the owners for what are the main factors for them for the conservation, it's the same method I used, and they mentioned the economic limitations, the weather conditions, and unavailability of the craftsmen were the main reasons for them to have difficulty for conserving their vernacular houses. Since the economic constraints is the biggest problem here, I would like to talk about the financial issues a bit. Well, I also directed the question if how much money they spend for the maintenance of the vernacular houses in average in a year. And this is the outcome. And they mentioned that it's quite expensive for them and it's hard for them to make the maintenance properly. On the other hand, I also asked them if they are aware of the governmental support, and 75% of them said they don't know. But actually, the governmental support for the vernacular house conservation actually exists. It's a bit maybe problematic, I can say. It's a long process, so it's not easy to implement or obtain the fund, but it's possible, not impossible. But most of the owners, they didn't know it. So this actually represents that the local people are actually unaware of the governmental supports, and there is a weak communication between the government and between the local government and the local people. I think it's very, very important in this case, because if the proper PR activities are done, advertisement is done for the encouragement of using the supports, and if the process is made a little bit simplified, I think most of the owners would be willing to get the support from the government to conserve their houses. After this question, I introduced, or I explained them there is actually this plan of the government to help you, to support you for the maintenance activities of your houses, and they couldn't believe, like, how come this would exist and how come we never heard about it. So I think it's one of the points which we should also focus on for the upcoming activities in this village. Well, I think it's been already a long presentation, so I would like to summarize it as much as possible. So, depending on the measurement survey, my personal observations on the site, as well as the questionnaire survey results, so I can easily say that the vernacular houses, as well as the villages, are under a big transition process. There have been various changes in terms of the building materials used, plan formations, etc. But there is no common language. There is no common way of making the changes in the village. There is no guideline, nothing. It is also confirmed during this process. As I expressed, the architectural conservation has been initiated, but right now it's only focusing on the vernacular houses individually. It's not a holistic approach. It's just, for example, the landscape is neglected. It's only the the building itself is designated. And as I mentioned before, the office of the Regional Conservation Board is located in the city center, and there is no local office. Therefore, it's very hard for them to control the process. Also, I need to explain or mention here that although, for example, the houses of some of the owners are already designated as a conservation site, but they had no idea when I asked them. They said, no, there is no conservation regulations in our case because it's not registered, so I can do whatever I want. But actually it was not, because I obtained the document from the office before going to the village. So therefore it is, I think, also a problematic issue, since the controlling is difficult for the staff of the conservation office, and the owners are unaware that their building is registered. So I think it's already the houses are already changed than when comparing to the time that I did my research. And yes, the local people are unaware of the financial supports. I already mentioned that there have been various changes in the village, and which was also reflected in the community ties. So what can we do? So this is the findings or the existing situation which I found. So what we can do, what I can suggest for the future, is that for the conservation as well as the maintenance activities, simple guidelines which could be understood by the local people should be provided by the local government. More holistic perspective should be applied in terms of the architectural conservation. Not only the buildings, but also the cultural landscape should also be conserved. As I mentioned, right now there is no participation from the local people as well as other stakeholders other than the NPO and the local government. So I think more participatory approach is necessary in this sense. The local people should be informed about the current or upcoming supports for the maintenance of their houses, and better communication should be provided or achieved between the local people and the villagers as well. Right now, there is no regulation for the new construction in the villages. I believe when the conservation plan for these villages are created, I believe there will be various regulations in this sense. But when I made this research, there was nothing. Therefore, I also made this suggestion to make a guideline for the new construction, as well as to provide a better maintenance activities for the surrounding forest areas, because the local people mentioned that the forest areas were supposed to be maintained by the government, but it is quite the frequency of the maintenance activities are very less. Therefore, the wild animals are coming to the village, which is making the local people scary and afraid. And since the population is a seasonal population right now, but we have the potential, because most of the vernacular houses still exist. So I think in a limited proportion, I can say, the local culture and the rural environment can be utilized for the attraction of the maybe daily tourism activities in here, so that it may increase the local people's interest in the village as well. But I think it's also another topic which needs to be discussed, because it may harm the existing nature and environment as well. That's why I want to highlight this suggestion. If it will be applied in the future, I think it should be, or it must be, in a controlled way, not to negatively affect the lifestyle of the local people in here. So I think it was a quite long presentation, but I would like to conclude my presentation here. So thank you so much for your patience to listen me until the end of it, and also until the end of the day. If you have any questions or comments, I would be more than happy to hear them.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this interesting and detailed presentation. We are really honored that you could be a part of our journey with us today. And now I wanted to put forward that the students of our college had also done something similar regarding to vernacular architecture, and we would like to showcase some light over what we had done. So I would invite Suhana to say some words about it.
Hello. Hi, ma'am. Thank you so much for presenting. It was really, really a good presentation.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So every year from our college, from semester 4, we go and document a village in our country, from our country. And this year we went to Jhintamara, which is in Orissa. So I would like to read a paragraph about it, what our experience was in that place. Walking through the dusty streets of this little settlement, we had a glimpse of the lives of the people. Looking closer and conversing with them gave us a much broader perspective on the whole perspective of the village. Our class documentation for semester 4 covers the lives of the village of Jhintamara through the houses, experiencing each family and their lifestyle, and the difference between the concepts of society. We try to analyze the settlement while maintaining the authenticity of the place and capturing the very essence of the village, its people. Being extremely self-sufficient and resourceful, the community convinced us how little we actually need to sustain and lead a good life. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, we have a lot of appreciation for you in the comment section, and I would like to read it out loud. Our principal really thanks you for being here, and she says that she's really honored that you could be part of this. Also, Samriddhi ma'am says that thank you so much, Elif, a very interesting presentation. And with that, I would like to call upon Saurabh sir and Asif sir to say a few words.
Hey, hi, Elif.
Hello.
Good evening. I think it's evening for you, little late for us. But it's good to see you. I think if you remember, we met indoor while you were in India last year.
Yeah, definitely. I remember. Nice to see you too.
Yeah, nice to see you. So I think what you are presented and what you kind of wanted to bring it down to is, I mean, it's an inspiration, in terms of the work that you've done and that you advocate for the students. And so it's not just documentation at the college that we undertake, but it's of course more about knowing these things that are around us, that are always there, that have always been there. also making people aware and more sensitive towards the environment that we have, and somehow take the correct measures to conserve them and to to protect them in the right sort of sense. So I think it has been a fantastic presentation, a showcase of what can be done, and rather what should be done about this heritage that we all somehow carry with us. Uh, so thank you so much on behalf of the College of Architecture. Thank you very much for presenting your work.
Oh,
And
thank you so much.
it's a pleasure to have you.
No, actually, it was my pleasure. I would like to add one small thing. So when you said making people aware or increasing their awareness, I think it's very important, because for the local people, I realized when I was measuring or documenting or asking questions about their houses, they were quite surprised, because for them it's something very unique. And since it belongs, it's maybe not correct to say it belongs to all, but it is something old. So they don't have that maybe appreciation, or they are not aware how important it is. So I feel that they felt very different after I did it, because yes, I'm Turkish and I did my research in Turkey, but I went there from Japan, and I mentioned that my professors are amazed after seeing your buildings. They really loved it. They wanted me to research about these and that, and I think they had more intention or to keep them. So in that sense, I think it's documenting is something very important, yes, but I think increasing the awareness of the people is another thing. So I agree with that, and thank you so much for your kind comments. It's my honor and my pleasure to be here.
Hi.
Hello.
If
I
you remember,
I remember too. Yes.
yeah.
Nice to see you.
Same here. I would like to first congratulate you on such an intense research which you have conducted. I think it gives us a lot of confidence and I would say a lot of inspiration as to how we can progress. Fortunately enough, we have been also following a similar sort of a trajectory in Rizvi College of Architecture, where every year we have been traveling to places, especially looking at the vernacular aspects and trying to capture the essence of the very humane nature of how a settlement, how people live together, which I think you underlined, at most. I mean, it just indicated, and we could just go through these villages with your documentations. I understand it was a mixture of quality and quantity both, as we look at analysis, what you have done. But nonetheless, I think it was very interesting to see these unseen and sort of secluded, isolated places through your lens. So thanks for that. I would, in fact, on behalf of Rizvi College of Architecture, whenever possible, now this is far-fetched as of now, but whenever possible, we would like to invite you, obviously, wholeheartedly invite you, and probably, if possible, we would also like you to be part of our sort of journey to document villages in India, these settlements in India. If we could have an exchange program, if we could look at lecture series or something like that. We are of a opinion that everything should be sent to the people. It should come to the forefront. We should talk about it. People should know about it. So I think that is something which we would like to do with your expertise and your collaboration with Rizvi. Would be very much happy to do that. Thank you again. I think it was fantastic. we have a 150 plus crowd to listen to your comments. Thanks for that.
Thank you
Although
so
not
much.
in person, but virtually, yes, we really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. We look forward to welcome you and see you in India. And
Sure.
again, yeah. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Again, ma'am, thank you so much on behalf of the entire RISV fraternity. It was great to have you with us here today.